A shooting board is essential to any woodworking shop, especially one that focuses primarily on hand tools. However, a shooting board is only going to be helpful to you if you can have a square fence, resulting in a square cut. Now, I've made a lot of shooting boards, but I always struggled to be able to build them so that the fence was square. However, that all changed when I found this shooting board design by Mike Pekovich. His design features an adjustable fence that pivots along one point and can be easily secured using this star knob. This adjustable fence means that you can adjust it to square before each use, guaranteeing it will be square every single time you use it. And in this video, I'm going to show you step by step how I made this shooting board so that you can make one too. The first step is to cut your materials to size. For simplicity's sake, I did this off camera, but wanted to go through the size and material I'm using. For the fence, I'm using a piece of soft maple. You can use any wood you want, but I'd recommend a hardwood that measures 9 3/4 inches long by 1 3/4 inches wide by almost an inch thick. You can increase the thickness of your fence, but remember you can only go as thick as the length of the star knob screw you're using. For the cleat, I'm using a piece of pine, and again you can use any wood you'd like, but I chose to use cheap pine since the cleat really doesn't need to be made of a hardwood, since it won't be taking any sort of beating. The cleat is 12 inches long, the same length as the width of the base, and 1 1/4 inch wide, and about an inch thick. For the base top, I'm using a piece of 1/2 inch plywood that is 17 3/4 inches long by 9 3/4 inches wide. Finally, for the base, I'm using a piece of 3/4 inch MDF that is 17 3/4 inches long by 11 3/4 inches wide. To ensure accuracy, it's important that the edge of the base top that your plane runs against is perfectly flat. As you can see, mine had a hump in the middle, so before doing anything else, I needed to flatten this edge. To flatten the edge, I did the following. I started by making evenly spaced lines across the entire edge of the board, which isn't necessary but will hopefully provide a better visual. Then starting with the 2 lines closest to the center, I started making passes with my plane. I kept taking longer and longer passes, working my way towards the outer edge until I was finally making a full-length pass. Essentially what I'm doing is intentionally making a cup in the board by first making continual passes in the middle, and then flattening out the cup as I continue to take longer and longer passes. If the hump is really bad, you can continue taking passes on just the center of the board until the plane doesn't take any more shavings, and then work your way outwards until you get a pass with 1 full-length shaving. Once you have your edge flat, you'll want to mark it in some way to ensure you glue everything together correctly. So as you begin using your shooting board, there is the potential of sawdust or parts of shavings or junk to accumulate along the plane track. This is an exaggerated example, but as you can see how with enough junk it can cause the plane to be unable to ride flat against the base top. To fix this, you want to create a small chamfer on the bottom base top. So using my plane and holding it at a 45-degree angle, I could plane the edge until I had a nice little chamfer. And as you can see, this little chamfer provides space for that junk to go and allows the plane to continue to ride flat against the base top. So with the preparation of the base top finished, I could move on to laying out the screw holes that will fasten the base top to the base. Using the base top as a reference, I could draw a line on the base marking the edge of the base top, and then using my square, draw evenly spaced horizontal lines, followed by evenly spaced vertical lines, resulting in a nice grid. Then at the cross sections of the grid, I could drill pilot holes and then countersink each hole. I'll admit I probably went overboard on the amount of screws I put into this thing. You probably would only need to do about half of what I did, or even could probably get away with not screwing it at all, since I'll be gluing the top in place. But hey, I can feel confident knowing this thing ain't coming apart. Anyway, with the base prepped, I could then glue the top into place. To make spreading the glue easier, a little trick I like to do is grab a wide piece of thin scrap wood. Use your handsaw to create a small, evenly spaced cuts along one edge. This will act as a little rake of sorts that, as you can see, makes spreading the glue super easy. Make sure you get the glue along the edges. However, on the good edge that the plane will ride against, I like to keep the glue about a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch away from the edge so that you don't get any glue squeeze out that will clog up and make that little nice chamfer you previously made null and void. Using a combination square to align the top onto the bottom, I could clamp down each corner to get everything securely in place, and then flip the board over and begin putting in my abundance of screws. Once I had all my screws in, and just to really make sure the top was affixed to the bottom, I grabbed some clamping blocks and really clamped the whole thing together. So with the base glued together, I can move on to prepping the fence.
Just with the base top, the first thing you'll want to do is create a slight chamfer on the bottom edge of the fence to provide a place for any junk to go. And then you'll want to ensure your fence is perfectly flat along one edge as well as square vertically to the base. Now a quick word about the placement of the fence. You may have wondered why everyone places the fence inset from the back edge of the shooting board. And that's basically because, as you can see, if I was to place the fence right on the edge, then as I planed, I have the potential for the plane to fly off the board and come up from the shooting board. But when I inset the fence from the back edge, you can see it provides room for the plane to still be supported once I shoot beyond the fence. So with that in mind, I next measured 3.5 inches from the back edge and made a mark for where I placed the front edge of the fence. Next, I could lay out where the pivoting screw hole will go. On my piece, this was 1 1/4 inches from the edge and about 7/8 to the middle of the fence. I could then move on to drilling a pilot hole through the fence and into the base. So placing the fence at the mark I previously made and using a square butted up against my plane, I could position the fence in such a way that it just slightly overhangs the base top. You want to have it overhang a little more than what I'm showing here, but the reason you want to do this is so that you can trim off the overhang and leave a perfectly flush edge that will help in preventing any tear out. So with everything lined up and square, I could then clamp the outer edge to keep everything in place. Now this doesn't have to be perfect because the fence will be able to be adjusted, but it is still important to try to keep this as square as possible. Once everything was secure, I could then use my drill press to drill a pilot hole through the fence and into the base top. Then I could screw the fence into place, and once it was in place, remove the clamp and lay out where the star knob would go. I placed the star knob 1 3/4 inches from the edge and 7/8 in towards the middle of the fence. Then I could repeat the same process from before, using my square pressed against my plane to get the fence squared and then clamp the fence down. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect, but it will benefit you if you can get this as close to square as possible. Then, back at my drill press, I could drill a slightly oversized hole from the diameter of the star knob I'm using through the fence and just barely into the base top to mark the position of where I'll need to drill for the threaded insert. Once this was done, I could unscrew the fence and then bring the base back to the drill press and, using the mark from the previous drilling, line up where I need to drill for the threaded insert. Now you'll notice that I didn't drill all the way through, and thankfully I realized this before putting in the threaded insert. But you'll want to make sure you drill all the way through the base so that the star knob will have room to go. Or you could cut the star knob thread so it only goes right to the bottom of the threaded insert, but it's probably just best to drill a hole all the way through. Anyway, with the hole drilled, I could then glue in my threaded insert. I used super glue. It probably would have been better to use an epoxy, or if you used the right diameter drill bit, you maybe even wouldn't need to glue. But either way, I placed the threaded insert in and ensured it was vertical and flush with the base top. And while that was drying, I could glue and screw on the cleat. I glued the cleat about 1.5 inches from the edge and used 3 countersink screws to really ensure that sucker wasn't going anywhere. After the threaded insert had time to dry, I could assemble everything and put the shooting board through its first test run. To set up the shooting board, I first drilled my pivot screw so it was slightly sticking out from the fence. Then aligned the fence until I felt the screw fall into place, and then drilled the screw into place. Then I put a washer on the star knob and screwed it into place. Finally, I could ensure the fence was square by taking my plane and pressing it flat against the shooting board, and with the square held against the plane, move the fence until it was flat with the square, and once everything was lined up, I could tighten the star knob down. Then I grabbed a test piece of maple and gave it a go. As you can see, I got some nice thin shavings, and most importantly, I got a perfectly square cut. So satisfied that the shooting board was working how I wanted, the last step I took, which is optional, was to put a coat of polyurethane to add a protective finish.
I'm excited to have a shooting board that will finally have a square fence, and I hope that this video was helpful to you in making your own. Remember to go check out Mike Pekovich's video and to support him, as he was the one that was the brains behind this shooting board style. Thank you for watching. I encourage you to go out in your shop and begin building something, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya.